Hello and welcome. So today we're going to be talking about what is spiritual. Everybody has their own definition, maybe. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about how I use those words and those concepts. First of all, how I use them evolved out of a really rich heritage and growing up of connection with the divine. In other words, I was raised by really devout, beautifully intended Irish Roman Catholics who would become advocates of the Dorothy Day Catholic Workers Program. And what that means is it's a particular kind of spirituality or religion that has to do with thinking good thoughts isn't enough, going to church on Sunday isn't enough. It all has to be backed up with actions. And so the Dorothy Day movement had a lot to do with it's still going on. You can find it if you're interested. But the kind of overriding motto certainly from my mother's side of the family was work is love made visible. Of course, the kids said work is love made miserable, but it's about you have to act on what you say you believe in. And that's like the foundation of all of it. So I was a kid in the 60s, and there was a reformation, there was a change in the Catholic Church in the 60s, and it became much more, the focus was much more now, how to be in the present kind of a thing. So yes, all the stuff about the Catholic Church, fine. This is pertinent to my conversation about spirit and my evolution of what I'm talking about when I use the word. Demonstrating what you believe in was the key. And that was what all the priests and nuns and people that we hung out with were involved in. I say hung out with because my father had been in the seminary before he was in World War II. And so my parents had a lot of friends who were priests and nuns. And my first job was working at the place where the priests live, answering the phones. So this kind of atmosphere of what you believe in matters materially to your day. You do things during your day all day long that connect you with the concepts of bigger than just our bodies, bigger than just what people think about us or what school says or what anybody, the regular kind of normal life kind of stuff. You do things all day long that connect you with, in those days, it was God, right? So all the people that I hung out with who were in the church, so all the priests and nuns and seminarians, always, and I went to a Catholic school, and everybody was encouraging us kids. Everybody was encouraging everybody else to really think about, what is it that you believe, and how do you act on that in your life? How does that demonstrate? How do you express that in your life? So in grade school, of course, they gave lip service to encouraging us to think about these things. Our teachers did, the nuns. And then I started working when I was 15, and they there were a lot of seminarians there who were going to, become priests. And I would argue with them. We would have debates. And I held them to task for all the crap that the nuns had done. And the what we would call today the patriarchy of the church. So I got to kind of exercise out of me a lot of stagnant resentments and a lot of the stuff that makes ex-Catholics. And it really helped me get clear about what I believed in and what was real to me. And what was real to me was a little bit different than the church. But the people that I knew had room. They didn't care about the vocabulary. They cared about something you're connected to that's not physical. It's not see, you can't see it. It's bigger. So I had some really interesting and odd awarenesses of revelation, spiritual experiences, whatever you want to call them, very young. And by the time I was about 13, I knew that what I learned in third grade was accurate, that energy never dies, it just changes form. And I knew that everything was energy. The stuff that anything that we could think of was energy. And I knew that people don't die, they just change forms. So their body dies, but the essence of them moves on. I knew that there's life after death. I knew that, trying to remember the word, reincarnation. I knew reincarnation was real. And I knew these things viscerally. There's, you can be clairsentient, which I am very much. This body is very clairsentient, which is feeling the vibrations of energies, which translates into feeling the emotions of other people. And then claircognizance is inner knowing. It's just, you just know it. You can't explain how you know it, you just know it. And then each of the senses have a clair. So you can have knowing and clair. You can have regular knowing, like book knowing, or by knowing by doing, kinesthetic knowing. And you can have, all the psychic just means beyond the 5 Time Warner version of the world senses. But each one of them have a spiritual part attached. So you can have your physical sight, and you can have clairvoyance, clear seeing. So see how all of this weaves together? Psychic means, to me, beyond the primer book of what's allowed. So the primer book says that you have 5 senses. Science says you have 92, which is more accurate. The body is just a lot more than what we think. And then each one of those has like a spiritual aspect, a psychic aspect, which is, again, it's just the unseen parts. So to me, there was religious, and then I evolved into spiritual, which was still believing in God and a deity and the hierarchy, just not the same hierarchy as the religious versions. And then evolved into understanding that there's the physical world and there's the non-physical world. And to me, that's spirit. That's the spiritual world. But it's not an invisible structure the same as patriarchy as a hierarchy. And then a lot of spiritual stuff is hierarchical as well. And just as it can be, if it's codified and regulated and traditionalized, it can be as stagnant and hierarchical and dominating over you as religion. And so in the beginning, I thought it was the religion I was against. And it turned out that it's the structure. And by that, I mean the hierarchy, because there's always going to be something above and something below, something better and something worse, something good and something bad. And it's that structure that's I was going to say inaccurate, but it's the structure that holds domination in place. And domination can be, traditional Brooks Brothers, Wall Street, this is the way it's going to be, or Madison Avenue, or, just regular kind of WASP domination. And then everybody else is less than that. And then they, colonialism. That's what I'm trying to say, colonialism. And it can be kind of traditional Brooks Brothers, but it can also be, whole grains and kale and wearing purple. It can be, you have to wear white, you have to do this, you have to do that. You have to, buy your things from this store or you're not spiritual. So that was the thing. When I was young, we were involved in a lot of alternative stuff, my family. And Pacifica was new, KPFT in Houston. And we all volunteered at Pacifica and hung out there. And that's when I was younger than a lot of people who worked there, obviously. So I witnessed that they were just as structural and hierarchical and cliquey as, the rich kids. It could be, in my school, it was the jet setters, which were the rich kids, and the cowboys, because it was Texas, so the kickers, and the jocks, which are the sporty people, and the freaks, the outcasts like me. And so I kept seeing that any group that you're in can be codified. And if you don't do this, then you're out. If you don't do that, then you're out. And it didn't matter. In one group, it was Brooks Brothers or, Chanel. In another group, it was T-shirts and blue jeans and long hair. And when you're on the inside of that, it's like your code for knowing each other, for spotting each other out in the world. But when you're not one of them, it's the code that keeps you outcast. So how does this all fit with spirit and what's spiritual? How does that happen? So everything, I discovered that all the stuff that I had identified as spiritual was kind of co-opted by different groups for different things. And so I realized, okay, it's not that. It's not wearing purple. It's not eating whole grains. It's not being a vegetarian. It's not wearing yoga pants. So what is it? And for me, it is the non-physical stuff. So when I talk about spirit or spiritual, I'm talking about non-physical. So it's not codified. It's not in a camp. There's no hierarchy to it. It's just, can you see it or can you not? So it's physical and spiritual. And that's what I really mean about spirit and spiritual. Like I said, a lot of times spirit and spiritual are like they're the transparent versions of um, the hierarchy of social structures. And that's not what I mean by it. Spiritual is not um, better than religion, and it's not a same structure, but without a church version either. So if you have uh, God, then angels, then humans, for instance, you have a hierarchy. And the thing to me that's just gotten clearer and clearer and clearer over the years is that when I was taught in grade school, when I was in the Catholic world, and they would teach that you're a part of God. They also taught a bunch of other stuff that conflicted with that, and you're born of sin, stuff like that, and you have to be redeemed, and only God and good works can do it. I mean, there was just a lot of control, and but the part that stuck to me is that you're a part of God. Well, what does that look like? What does that mean? What's the practical application of that, right? And people like Shirley MacLaine, when she wrote Out on a Limb, talking about the spiritual experience of awakening to the fact that if God and I are one, then we're one. I can't. This hierarchy thing doesn't work. And the spiritual experiences that I had, I was sitting on a mountainside in Sedona long before Sedona was famous. I was probably 17. And I just had, it's hard. I've never met a spiritual experience that translates well. They're incredibly profound when you have them, but they don't translate very well. And I was just sitting on the side of the mountain looking out at the vista and the painted desert or whatever I was looking at. And I had this knowing, like it just dropped in, of how the mountain and the vista and the ant and the grains of sand and the invisible molecules of the air were all the same. They're all equal. And none is greater than the other. And that spark is in everything. And at that moment, I mean, back in those days, things to me were things. So there was a mountain and there was the desert and there were the trees, right? And so the mountain, desert, and trees were all one. And the thing that I knew but I didn't articulate yet was that they're all made up of molecules. And all molecules have energy. They are energy at their core. And every molecule, everything you can think of has consciousness. Everything you can think of has consciousness. So it's not only that the tree outside the window has consciousness, but every cell and atom and molecule of the tree outside your window has consciousness. So this idea that there's like mundane, everyday, regular stuff that exists with or without spirit, that's what doesn't work. There is no thing without consciousness. And that's what I mean by spirit. All right. Comment below, ask questions. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks.